Time to talk about Dunes as we sip on our water of life.
The old poison. We better talk fast.
The worm essence.
Yeah.
It's not good, in case you're wondering.
Nope.
It doesn't taste good at all, but we're gonna keep it for the bit.
We got it from real worms, and if you see us cringing throughout, that's why.
It tastes like worm.
I hope it doesn't make my baby into Anya Taylor-Joy.
I sure hope not. We watch Dunes. This is Green Takes. For anyone new to the channel, Green Takes is where we go watch more new release films and give more off-the-cuff impressions and kind of first thoughts, because we've just come from seeing it in the theater. So that's what Green Takes is. Buckle up, and let's talk about Dunes.
Dune 2, to be clear.
Yeah, sorry, we've been specifically only referring to it amongst ourselves as Dunes. It is actually called Dune Part 2, directed by our boy Denis Villeneuve.
A Quebecer.
A Quebecer, a fellow Canadian, which we always like to see. Yeah. Denis is probably my favorite working director.
He's got to be up there. Incredible filmography. I mean, you've seen more than I have, but I mean, Prisoners is a masterpiece. Enemy, the Blade Runner 2049. Like, yeah. He runs some genres, and he really hasn't had a miss yet, as far as I'm aware.
No, all his movies are great. And we are also Dune fans. You've read just the first book, right?
Just the book that this one is and the last one were based on.
Right.
You've read all of them right up until the end of the Heat Death of the Universe, yeah?
But not quite. I've read all the way through God Emperor of Dune, which is the fourth one, and I am about to start Heretics of Dune, which is the fifth. And there are 6 total written by Frank Herbert. His son took over, and they got kind of crappy, apparently. So I've been deep into the Duneverse. You have some of the paperbacks sitting back there. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this book series. I've reread the book. I've reread the first book twice. So it was very exciting for me to finally get to see this. We both really enjoyed the first movie. I think I liked it more than you did, but I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
But it did feel like a first movie.
Yeah.
It made me excited to watch this one. And this was the one I was really waiting for, because I think this movie gets into the real meat of the Dune story and what makes the Dune story unique and confusing and weird. So super stoked to see it.
It's only fragments. Nothing's clear.
I think without further ado, we probably should get into first impressions. I'm nervous about this, so I want you to go first. I'm just gonna be honest, because I feel like it's a movie that you would just hate for some reason. So what did you think of Dunes?
I was trying to come up with a bit. I thought it was great. I mean,
okay.
I did think it was great. There are some problems I'm going to express, but most of my problems are going to amount to decisions that I think were valid, but that I would have made a different decision.
Okay.
And also, I mean, I'll just say it up front. I think this should have been 2 movies.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see an argument for that. I think it is arguably a little, feel the length.
Got a little Rise of Skywalker-y, where it was kind of like, we gotta go here, now we gotta do this, now we gotta go there. And I just think it was a little squished compared to the first one especially. But overall, no. I mean, I thought this was spectacular. I think this is probably the best technically made film ever.
Yeah, it's...
Not adjusting for era, like, sure, Wizard of Oz, like, for the time, but just sound design and visuals, and this is probably number 1.
When I walked out of the theater, I said, that was a big you movie. Yeah. It's just got all the stuff.
Yeah, and it just sounds incredible. Just every scene. There was one scene in the first one, the scene of Paul's face, where I was like, oh, that's garbage CGI. And that really annoyed me. And then there was none of that in this. There was not one thing in the whole movie where I was like, oh, that looked bad. No. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm not trying to be too hyperbolic. But I do think this trilogy, because they will make a third, which will cover the second book, and that's kind of what Denis said will be the 3 he wants to make. I think this trilogy very much could be this generation's Lord of the Rings. And I'm not saying I like it as much as Lord of the Rings, because better not be.
Lord of the Rings is just the holy grail. Nothing will ever compete. We can't put it there. But it feels like this movie is one of those weird times when everyone came together on something. Yeah. It's like Hollywood's like, we're gonna make a big budget, all the money in the world, internationally marketed movie, billboards all around town, video game tie-ins, everything. But we're gonna do it for a kind of weird sci-fi adaptation of a book from the 70s and give it to like an auteur director and give him free reign.
Yeah.
And usually you only get one of those things. And the weirdest part is that people like it.
Yeah.
People are going to the movie. Everyone and their mom has seen this movie. There's like grandparents in the movie theater with me that enjoyed it. And I'm like, it feels like one of these things should not have been possible. Either it wouldn't have gotten marketed properly, or it would have sucked, or people wouldn't have seen it. But all of it happened. And that just feels, that's why it feels like Lord of the Rings. It feels like one of those weird cultural moments where we just got a great giant movie that everyone likes. And that doesn't happen very often.
I want you to know I will love you as long as I breathe.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I think it's easy to kind of gloss over the fact that everything came together for this movie. This is an incredibly hard thing to adapt. There's been famously a lot of tries that didn't go well, and watching this movie, I was very conscious of all the things that made this a really difficult adaptation.
Yeah.
That I thought Denis did an incredible job with. I think, it felt like a Denis Villeneuve movie, but it also felt like a blockbuster, which is just, and I mean, there's 8 more things I could rattle off where it was true to the source material, true to the actors and the vision, but then kept, and the book readers, it was very faithful to the books with like a couple tiny asterisks, and doing all of that while retaining mass appeal. I think it was just, I would compare it strongly to Avengers Infinity War, where it's like, not as a movie necessarily, but just in like, there were so many different directions pulling on this. The fact that it basically satisfied all of them is incredible.
Yeah, it'd be like if they made Avengers Infinity War and it was just as successful, but instead of being a Marvel property, it was like a weird sci-fi book adaptation.
Yeah.
And it is amazing that it worked.
And it was directed by like David Lynch.
Yeah. Well, we'll go into that. So yeah, we obviously both loved it. I think this is Green Takes, so we're going to break it out by the good and the bad.
Right.
Not going to have a ton of bad. I do have some points of criticism.
Yeah.
We'll be mostly talking about stuff we enjoyed. But let's start off with the good. I want to segue a point you just made, which is that this is a really good adaptation.
Yes.
It's such a hard book to adapt because if you've read the books, this will be very obvious to you. Dune is not a typical hero's journey. You think it's going to be the story of a boy with a chosen one prophecy who gets knocked down, builds himself back up, liberates the downtrodden, and takes the day and defeats the bad guys.
And if you're only half paying attention, it is.
It is.
If you're a grandma who watches these 2 movies, you probably just think that's what it is. And if it works as that.
And if you read the books and don't think too hard, you might think it's just that.
Yeah.
But it's not. Frank Herbert even famously said that he wrote Dune as a warning against charismatic leaders. That's what he wanted to portray. It's a commentary on the hero's journey, because what Paul does is, yes, he wins the day, he saves the downtrodden, he revenges his family. He also starts a crusade that'll kill billions of people across the galaxy.
Yeah.
And that's arguably worse than the people he's getting revenge on. And he knows that's what's going to happen, but still go down that path. So Paul is a very complicated character, and while he is the protagonist of this story, he is not necessarily a hero. And that's what makes Dune complicated. And this movie, I think, adapted that perfectly, which is the hardest thing to get right about the books.
This is a form of power that our world has not yet seen. The ultimate power.
The books, that's laid out in subtext, right? Like if you're not, like you said, if you're not really paying attention in the books, there's points where you're like, this seems a little messed up. But if you just kind of breeze through it, you might not even think about it.
Right.
It's explored very nuanced. It kind of, even when I was reading the book, I remember reading the last chapter and Googling is like, is Paul the bad guy? Like I had that moment where you're still doubting yourself. You're like, am I reading this right? Is that what it's like? This movie formalized it more than that. And it brought it to the forefront. And I'd say it dumbed it down. But that's what you need to do for a movie. It made the conflict of Paul being kind of villainous more at the front. And it put that into the character conflicts. It made Jessica clearly the voice of embracing the religion, of pushing Paul towards this.
Right.
It made Chani the voice of reason, of like, you're losing yourself, this is not a good thing you're doing, and I love you. And it made Stilgar the voice of the fundamentalists, of like, this is a man who will follow you to the ends of the earth because of his religious fervor.
Right.
That's not in the books so clearly. Those characters are a lot more passive, there's way less stuff. But in this adaptation, they put it in the characters, which brought that to the forefront, which is a brilliant way to explore those themes without just spoon feeding it to us.
But also more clearly, and like with the understanding that you can deliver less nuance in a movie.
Yeah.
So you kind of had to just
you
had
have to
tie
bring it
to
up
something.
a bit or ignore it.
No, I think that's a really great point. I don't have much to add to it. I think as an adaptation, there were decisions to make here, and this is sort of in my category of not quite bad. There are some decisions I think you could have made to kind of streamline this a little bit that I think would have been fine and wouldn't have hurt the story, but would have pissed off book people and would have. And he made the decision, right? Denis wanted this to be incredibly faithful, like down to tiny details that didn't matter and didn't necessarily add much to the movie itself.
Right.
Which, that's not a good or bad thing. And I think it's commendable that he held this together with the decision of like, we are going to put everything in the book that we can.
Yeah.
And everything we put in is in the book.
And the most important stuff from the book made it in.
Yeah.
And I think a great comparison piece, you have not seen David Lynch's Dune, right?
No.
I've seen David Lynch's Dune. So just so everyone knows, the David Lynch's Dune covers the entire Dune book.
Right.
So what we just saw up to in Dune Part 2 by Denis Villeneuve, that's covered in one movie.
Yeah. And I'm arguing this should have been 3.
Yeah. So you can imagine how rushed it is. And by the end of David Lynch's Dune, Paul is riding in on sandworms, high-fiving people. When they defeat the Harkonnens, rain literally starts falling from the sky and Toto music starts playing.
Nice.
It is like they completely ignore the subtext. Right. There's no exploration of whether Paul should be doing this. Is this the right thing? What's, the morally great? They just drop it.
Right.
And that's probably what most adaptations would do because it's too complicated to get into that in a movie. But this movie found a way to do it. So I need to commend them for that.
This prophecy is how they enslave us!
I mean, the performances I think are all good to great. There's a couple that I might get to later. Leading off with the good, my favorite performance in the movie, and it's probably a hot take, was Zendaya. I thought she was absolutely incredible.
I thought she was good. I don't know that I'd put her at the top of the top, but I thought she was good, and they also gave Chani a lot of agency as a character.
They gave her a lot, but I thought that Zendaya did an incredible job with limited amounts. She's like a Jim Carrey level face actor. Like, I noticed this about halfway in where I started keying in, where there'd just be scenes of 10 people standing, and I just am only looking at her because she's just got so much going on. She's just such a good physical actress. And I think she felt more like a person than anyone else in the story.
Certainly.
I don't think that necessarily anyone else was trying.
Right.
Like, Timothée Chalamet very much didn't feel like a person. There were like
he
a
feels
couple
like
of scenes.
a messiah,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, like
Yeah.
a religious figure.
And I mean, I think like Jessica and Gurney, like they all very much feel like book characters. Whereas Chani, Zendaya, very much felt like a person.
Yeah.
In this story, and who still fit and did her job, did her role in the story brilliantly, but I just found myself connecting to a really great degree, and they did that without kind of exaggerating her role in the story, because again, I think that's a thing that, I mean, the producer's notes might say, give Chani a lot bigger role, and they give her a little bit of a bigger role, but it never felt forced in.
No.
Which I thought, again, just in terms of balancing all these different considerations, I think that I loved what they did with her character. I thought it fit the book perfectly, but then she and the director worked together to bring more to that character than, like, to augment that character to a higher degree than almost anyone else from the books.
And I would say that's a testament to the writing too.
Yeah.
Because they did make Chani almost the audience surrogate.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of watching it through her eyes. When you're supposed to be supporting Paul, she supports Paul. When you're supposed to be questioning Paul, she's questioning Paul. And they did a really nice job with that. So yeah, I would agree. I mean, her performance didn't jump out as much to me. I thought it was good, but I would agree. I liked what they did with Chani's character, particularly because in the book, she's very passive.
Yeah.
I remember her and Paul meet in the book, and like a chapter later, she's like pregnant, and there's no
It's
development.
written in the 60s, right?
Yeah,
like, it was very progressive gender-wise for the time.
Yeah, but like Jessica and Chani are given so much to do in this movie that contributes to the plot so much and spreads out everyone's agency in a really good way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story.
I don't care what you believe. I believe.
So what did you think of Chalamet?
I thought he. Well, I thought he was good. I thought my favorite parts were kind of the smaller human moments with Jessica and with Chani and with the Fremen. I think when it got to the standing up and screaming to the crowds, there were a couple of times where I was just like,
Okay.
I don't know that this is as good as some of the other performances. This wasn't like this wasn't a Carrie level performance from him, I think, by any means. But I thought he did a really good job.
I think I'm totally opposite on him.
Really?
Because I found he was fine when he's just Paul. When he's rich kid, entitled kid, doesn't know his place in the world, he was fine. And he's that for the whole first movie too, where I was like, he's serviceable. There's nothing wrong. I found when he flipped the switch and embraced the prophecy and became the Kwisatz Haderach, it was like, I bought it 100%. And I found his speech very compelling. Like it was reminiscent of like, terrifying dictators in Earth's history. I thought he sold that. And as a man who is, of a slighter frame, he still looks quite young. He sold being this like intimidating religious leader in a way that I didn't think he was capable of. And that's not me knocking on Chalamet. Paul is supposed to be that. Paul is like 15 to 18 throughout this book. He's supposed to be like a young boy that becomes this powerful leader. And I thought he did a really good job selling that switch. In particular, the final scene in the throne room with like taking Irulan's hand and defeating Feyd-Rautha. I bought 100%. Like I'd follow this guy on a religious crusade. I get it, and I thought he did a really great job with that.
Consider what you're about to do, Paul Atreides.
Silence!
Another thing I have to just shout out about this movie is it's kind of a mixture of things, but everything from the set design, costuming, props, everything about the like world building of this was insanely engaging to me. Oh
yeah.
Like we watched it in the theater, but I wanted to like pause and just look at stuff. I think the best example of it is, well, there's two things I have to talk about. First, they convert Jameis's body to water at the beginning of the movie, right? And when they convert it to water, there's all these mechanisms to get the water out that are interesting in their own right. But then when they fill up the water, they put them into these like bags.
Like accordion, like bagpipe thingies?
Yeah. That look like sandworms. And then they use that to transport the water to the big well. I was like, that's such a cool little prop. Like someone had to build that. That would have like taken time. Like any other movie, you just get a brown bag and put the water in that.
This was one of the most important parts of making something feel like Dune, I think, is making all of this tech feel totally seamless.
Yeah.
But still interesting, right? All these people, this is not Star Wars. This is called a lightsaber, and here's how it works. Like, that is not what the movie's about.
It's like lived in.
Everyday, routine, old, crappy stuff. It's a means to an end, and all these people have been working with the same tech and living in this world for 10,000 years. And I thought, because you didn't, like, you noticed it. I think a lot of people aren't gonna realize that they liked that, right? That their brain liked that, but how?
Yeah.
But the world that they created by all this tech just being there, being brilliantly designed and integrated.
It's so immersive.
Yeah.
I think a more in-your-face example is when they're on Giedi Prime for the gladiatorial fight. Is one of the coolest visual sequences I've seen in years. The black sun making everything be black and white was just like a feast to look at. I could have had that go on longer, and even though it was a total aside, I was like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yes. I was going to get to it in the negative. I'm going to do it now. The biggest mistake this movie made, that needed to be the first scene in the movie.
I thought it was going to be the first scene in the movie.
I thought it was too. And when it wasn't, and when they didn't do that, and when they got to it, I was like, what are you doing? What the hell?
I literally walked into the theater with Julia, and I'm like, I want to make a prediction. I think that it'll open with a gladiatorial fight, this movie.
Yeah.
But I was disappointed. So I think that's fair, but...
It was brilliant. It was so good.
That is one of, like, it's well executed in terms of being a great fight scene, but everything they built out for that, to build that arena, is one of the coolest pieces of sci-fi I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, the big triangle and like the tower with...
And those like weird guys with hooks in the arena with the horns. I'm like, I want more of this. Like, this makes me want him to adapt all crazy of the 6 books. Because I'm like, I want to see how he adapts these crazy things.
Right.
But everything about the set design, the world building, everything that was like sci-fi centric was perfectly done.
For me, it was the spaceships.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the Emperor's ship, just this giant silver sphere, and then when Phaedra takes over the planet, and there's that ship that looks like a big face that's shooting all the missiles.
Yeah.
Like the first one did well at this too, right? All the ships look great, the sci-fi parts look great. And another big part of it for me is the weapons, which this was mostly Denis. I mean, Frank Herbert talked about like lasers and swords and shields, and that's fine, and he did a lot of great groundbreaking stuff in that book, but a lot of this was how Denis chose to adapt it and make it look and feel. And it has been a very long time, I think, since a sci-fi property brought in weapons and shields and this kind of stuff that felt this fresh.
Right.
Lasers that are actually lasers. This is a nerdy thing to get excited about.
Yeah.
But like a Star Wars laser that moves at 26 miles an hour, that's nonsense. That doesn't... And the fact that these were like real lasers that just cut a ship in half immediately, and the way the shielding looked, and the way that all the ships were shooting at each other, just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah. I've never wanted to buy the like coffee table book, the art of a movie, more than this movie, just to see all the stuff they made for it.
And in so many futures, our enemies prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
I wanted to ask you this, as a bigger book fan than I am, how did you feel about how they handled Jessica and the daughter? Because I would say that kind of got shrunk from the book, if not removed. Yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't read the books, in the book, Jessica actually bears the child and births Aelia, the daughter.
Yeah.
And Aelia is born with adult intelligence because of the experience she had with the Water of Life, which means the 2-year-old baby can like speak like an adult, and actually is the one who kills Baron Harkonnen.
Right.
She goes to the throne room. I was so relieved they didn't do it.
Okay.
I thought the adaptation of Jessica and the baby was perfect because I was nervous all movie. If you've watched David Lynch's Dune, you know how friggin' weird that scene is. When the little girl with an old lady voice walks into the room and starts yelling at everyone, it doesn't work.
Right.
I don't think you can put it on screen and have it not be laughable.
Poor Emperor. I'm afraid my brother won't be very pleased with you.
Silence!
Having the same dynamic of like, you have this unborn child who has extreme intelligence. They still found a way to do it with her speaking to the unborn child without making it really stupid and silly. So I thought that was great, but that's just my 2 cents. I'm sure there's some people that are angry, but it's...
Presumably. I mean, you had to reduce something, right? And I think they did a good job of getting all the important information across without changing anything major about kind of Jessica and the daughter. I definitely did feel like I wanted a little bit more Rebecca Ferguson, just selfishly. I mean, I love her, and
She was great in the movie.
she was great, but
And probably the best costuming.
Oh, yeah.
Every time she showed up, she was just dressed cooler than the last time, and by the last scene, she's like decked out with gold face tattoos, the giant headdress, because she's become the full Reverend Mother at that point.
yeah.
That was fantastic.
It was cool the way that was kind of happening behind the scenes. Like every time they cut back to her, she changed.
Yeah.
Like stuff had happened
And
to
her following had multiplied.
Yeah, and she now had more face pain. She was just like referring, oh my, the baby says this, and you're like, I'm sorry?
Yeah. No, she was great. Another aspect of the book that was really well handled was Phaedra. Because Phaedra, played by Sting in the David Lynch version, for anyone who's familiar.
Right. Austin Butler here.
Austin Butler, who's fantastic. I have not seen him in anything because I haven't seen Elvis and I don't know what else he's done.
Sure.
I thought he was great, and I thought it was so smart. In the book, Phaedra is supposed to be the anti-Paul. He's
Right.
the competitor of the Kwisatz Haderach prophecy. He's the one that Bene Gesserit are trying to place. But he also serves as literally a dark version of Paul. Everything about Paul, Phaedra is the opposite. He's sadistic.
Nobody
he's evil.
likes him. He
Nobody,
inspires no love. Like he's
So they're equal and opposite.
no one he cares about. Yeah.
But the book established that in such a nuanced way that it just went over my head when I read them. And someone said like Phaedra, the Dark Paul or something, and I read it and I'm like, really? I thought he was just like another bad guy.
Yeah.
But this movie formalized it. And if you watch this movie, you're like, you get that they are competitors, that
Yeah.
they are two in the same but opposite. And introducing the Feyd-Rautha the way they did, giving a bit more screen time, and Austin Butler's performance, I thought was a huge plus to this movie that I wasn't expecting. I was ready for him to be in 2 scenes, but I think he was a contender for one of my favorite performances in the movie.
I completely agree. I have to call out, and this is something I have seen online and that my girlfriend independently thought as well. His first line, he sounds like Elvis. And so we both, like, if you go back and listen to it, the first thing he says, it's like, oh, weird. And then it's fine after that. It's perfect after that.
Well, it's funny because I guess after that, he's pretty much doing a Stellan Skarsgård impression.
Yeah, which is just like, I guess we're just saying that's the Harkonnen accent,
Harkonnen.
still in Skarsgård.
Except for Dave Bautista.
That's fine. And yeah, no, I thought Austin Butler was great, the way that they handled his character. I think every scene between him and Léa Seydoux and Charlotte Rampling, all the Bene Gesserit, all that kind of off-world stuff I thought was brilliant. Another one of my favorite performances in the movie was definitely Florence Pugh.
So good.
I was really surprised.
Yeah.
Another just like the subtleties.
Yeah.
And a lot of this movie is just holding on one person while they stand somewhere pretty and deliver lines. And every line she gave, she is that character.
She is, and she's
embodying.
perfectly cold and calculating,
Yeah.
and you know that she knows exactly what's going on, but she expresses frustration very subtly. She was great. Chris Walken, for how little he was in it, I thought was fantastic. I thought
yeah.
he just exudes this aura that if you're gonna have the Emperor of the known universe and you're only gonna give him 6 lines, you kind of need a guy like Walken to make it believable.
And like most of his lines are while he's at sword point as well,
Yeah.
right? And he's this weak old man. Yeah.
Although I did have a little chuckle when Baron gets brought to the throne and Chris Walken's on the throne and goes, Baron.
I know. I thought of you.
I can't quite get past that it's Chris Walken. But
I think that given that they cast Chris Walken, which was probably a studio decision, they did a really good job and he did a really good job playing it right. I think
he's great.
hard to
Honestly,
cast him in a
I think
serious
Chris
role.
Walken's having a late career renaissance between this and the show about the office where you can't leave.
Severance? I haven't seen that.
Severance, he's in that and he's
Okay.
amazing.
Okay.
He's coming a little career comeback and I'm
for
very
him.
happy about it.
All right, get him in a Tarantino one. The next
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get him back.
Deal with this prophet. Send assassins.
Feyd-Rautha, he's psychotic.
In the first movie, I had one very specific problem with it.
Right. And I know what this problem is.
The desert wasn't enough. I watched the first movie. The desert didn't feel scary.
And I need to explain that when
Okay.
me and Avery hadn't talked about the first movie in a while, I'm
Right.
like, I don't remember, did you like the first movie? He's like, I like the first Dune, but the desert was not hot enough.
I stand by that. You watch that first movie, and they tell you that this is a desert where you're gonna die in 1 hour if you're out
Yeah.
there. And, you know, people are out there, it just seems nice. It seems like a nice temperate beach.
They're taking off the still
No one's
suits.
sweating, no one's ever wearing a mask. It's like, it's fine. This movie, they did
The
it.
desert's hot.
Desert is like one of the best
Dusty.
performances in the movie.
Hot, yeah.
Yeah, you get it. They impress the beauty and the terror of this desert onto you over
Yeah.
and over again.
It's very visceral. Like when Paul is first riding the sandworm, I was like, oh, this looks like it hurts.
Yeah.
This looks like it sucks.
and the fact that they do this giant CGI monster in a way where you're like feeling the sand on your
Yeah.
face, incredible.
Really well done.
Yeah. So I wanted to give you props, Denis. You listened. You listened to my criticism of Dune Part 1, and you fixed it. Good job.
You made the desert hot.
You made it hot.
Well, I guess we should get into the bad.
Into the bad.
I don't have a ton, and I want to piggyback on a point you made earlier about paring things down.
Yep.
I think the movie, I felt the length a bit. As a book reader and an avid fan of this, if this movie was an hour longer, I'd have been fine.
Yeah.
I'd have been like, if there was just more scenes of cool stuff, I might have been like, this movie's too long, but I still would have enjoyed myself because this is kind of like Lord of the Rings, where I'm
Yeah.
like, the more you want to give me, the better. I trust you. Everything in this is good. I'll eat it up. But from an objective standpoint, I think the movie was a little bit overlong. And I don't know that the actual runtime was too long, but more about the pacing.
2.5, 240.
245. It's not the movies can't be that long, but I think that the beginning, I felt the length. There was a lot of time setting up Paul with the Fremen.
I thought the opening was weird pacing and tone wise as well.
Yeah, I didn't, like, for the beginning third of the movie, I'm like, if I didn't read the books, I don't know that I would know what the thrust is. Yes, they want to defeat the Harkonnens, but like, is that what they're doing?
Yeah.
Is that what Paul wants? Like, it felt a little bit aimless in the beginning, and I think that the runtime, that's what made the runtime feel a bit long, is that for like, I didn't really know where it was going, or I knew that if I hadn't read the books, I wouldn't know where it was going.
Right.
And then conversely, the war at the end felt a little bit too short. When
Yeah.
they did raid the Emperor with the sandworms.
I mean, compare the runtime of that whole thing to like Minas Tirith, right?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
a tenth of the length.
I would have liked to see more of the atomics being used and the
Yeah.
sandworms being rodent into battle. We got enough of it that I was satisfied, but from a pacing perspective, it was a little bit rushed at the end, a little bit too long at the beginning. That's really my only thing I want to throw into the bad.
That's kind of why I'm saying 3 movies, because I think if we had gotten to that point and it had been an hour-long battle scene with the cider car, I think most people are sitting here going like, "Ah, come on, man.
Yeah.
So I think that I absolutely think you could have gotten enough interesting and good material here to make another movie. Whatever, not Denis' decision. People might have their own opinions on that. It's definitely what I think. Similarly, my view on the first little stretch of the movie was that it felt a little bit whiplashy to me. So I just rewatched part 1 last weekend. So it's very fresh. And that movie doesn't end with Paul being chummy with the Fremen. They're still scary at this point. He just had to fight to the death with one of them, and the rest were squatting around. Like, Zendaya didn't have a line. Stilgar was not friendly. And the fact that this movie opens, I mean, I think it should open with the Austin Butler, like the scene.
Gladiatorial scene.
Yeah, the gladiatorial scene. But the fact that this opens with them, like, you know, sharing brewskis and joking around, like not literally, but almost. I thought it was a little whiplashy, and it was kind of hard for me to kind of place myself in that just a little bit.
Yeah, I just chalked it up to him getting credit from killing Jameis, but I do, when the movie started, I had a moment of confusion about how long had been missed. Because it felt like they'd been with them for months at this point, but they also still had Jameis's body, so it was from the same excursion. So there was a little bit, it's a part 2 movie. There's always going to be this awkward middle bit. In the same way that the first one very much felt like a part 1. I think they could have cleaned up the beginning a bit, cleaned up a little bit of the pacing.
The editing of this movie was nothing short of Herculean, so the fact that this was the worst thing I can say was that's pretty good.
Yeah, and God knows how much they cut. There is a lot cut, and Denis has a stance that some directors take, which is he will never release a director's cut.
Ah, darn.
He says, like, whatever was in theaters is the final version, and everything else is lost.
With this, I guess.
Which is it's a choice. It's a personal thing. I would obviously love to see more, but I also trust the process. This guy, he knows better than we do.
And I'm gonna get to, I guess my last one, which might be kind of controversial, but I have one. I did not like Javier Bardem. I did not like Stilgar. I did not like how he was written. I did not like his performance. Javier Bardem, one of the best actors alive. Anton Chigurh might be the best movie character, full stop.
It was funny to see him and Josh Brolin back together.
That was kind of funny. That was entertaining. I saw some like behind the scenes stuff of them that's entertaining, but I did not like him. He got like some Marvel quips in the first 10 minutes that I thought were horribly out of place, that were one of very few things in the movie that took me out of it. I thought that his transition from being, like, I liked him in the first movie. The scene where he like walks in and is very kind of alien and he spits on the ground in front of Leto, I thought was great. And he was the hardest case of whiplash for me, where he goes from that to, oh, Lisa Logie. Like, it was weird. It did not feel earned. I did not feel like he had a character arc. I didn't love what he did with the character. In a movie full of performances that ranged from like solid and in line with what I expected to excellent, he was the one where I was like,
Yeah, I think he's the Gimli of the movie. He is the comedic relief. Not that he's fully comedic, but he is the comedic relief in the movie. For like a couple scenes, there's some lines of comedy. I don't 100% disagree, but I want to give a counterpoint.
Okay.
Stilgar in the books is kind of like the mentor for Paul, the foil for Paul. He's everything, and the relationship between Paul and Stilgar is very complicated, and it evolves a lot. And even by the 3rd book, it's still evolving and kind of convoluted. Everything about Stilgar that made him a nuanced character, that made him gray, that made him like for Paul's ascendancy, or anti, or skeptical of them as outsiders, or trusting and vouching for them, all of that was given to Jessica and Chani.
Yeah.
And all Stilgar was left with was being a devout fundamentalist. So Stilgar's character took a big hit, but I think the overall story was improved by nerfing Stilgar and giving that stuff to characters that had not much going on in the book. So while I
Yeah.
don't totally disagree with his I liked his performance, I need to say.
I don't think like Javier Bardem ruined the character by any means, but
I appreciated how they rebalanced that a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was to the movie's overall benefit, even if I did miss a bit of book Stilgar in my own way.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I understand why it happened. I'm not like baffled, but yeah.
We're kind of scrounging for bad issues with this movie.
As I coined in a previous video, we're picking toenails out.
We're picking toenails to find bad things about Dunes.
Yeah, no, it was great, and that's really all I can do on the bad. I mean,
I'm so excited for the final one.
And I'm very excited. I have not read Dune Messiah is the next one.
Dune Messiah.
And I mean, obviously, having read the books, that has the effect that it has on watching these movies. But I'm very excited to watch Dune Messiah, no book.
And what's interesting is that Dune Messiah was originally part of the first Dune book. The publisher forced Frank Herbert, the author, to make it a separate book.
Well, Dune is 2 books. Like the Dune novels split in half.
The split. And originally, Dune Messiah was just the final part of that. So it kind of is one continuous story, and I also understand why Denis wants to stop there. I won't spoil anything, but the books do get very weird and bizarre.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of time jumps, and there's a lot of focusing on characters outside of the ones that we've seen so far. So to keep it focused, I think that is a natural place to end it, and I am so excited. And I think that if that adaptation maintains the quality of the first 2, this will be one of those greatest film trilogies of all time.
And I think that's a great segue into what I'd like to do right now, which is a little segment I have planned. And would you be all right with that?
Segments.
We got a little segment
We're doing
here.
segments now.
And the segment, good sir, that I've prepared for you is I've prepared a little ladder of similar-ish movies. And I just want you to tell me as I run through these movies, is Dune 2 a better movie than this? A worse movie than this? Or is it too tough a comparison?
Okay.
Okay? So just your gut reaction. You don't have to justify everything, all right? So is Dune 2, or Dune Part 2, is it better than Avengers Infinity War?
Yes.
Yeah, that one's pretty easy?
I think that one's pretty easy.
Okay. I think that's fair. I mean, you might get some people who don't think so.
I think that Avengers Infinity War did exactly what it wanted to do.
Right.
But I think that Dune Part 2 is a better made movie.
All right, that's fair. Do you think Dune Part 2 is better than peak The Expanse? Whatever your best stretch of The Expanse is. In terms of just sci-fi right to the veins.
It's too hard to compare.
That's
TV to movie, it's...
Right.
If I'm comparing all of The Expanse, it's like it's too nebulous.
Okay.
My inclination would be to say that Dune Part 2 is better because it's so concentrated. There are dull parts of The Expanse shows. It kind of weighs it down.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I will say that I think I still like The Expanse better as a property and as sci-fi. It's also tough because Dune was written in the 60s.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to give it enough credit for that, for how
True,
subversive and ahead of its time it was. The Expanse is written in 2012 through 2017.
Yeah, it's more.
But I might pick The Expanse, but I think that one's definitely
All right, what's next?
comparable.
I'm nervous.
Next up, the original Blade Runner. Is Dune Part 2 a better movie than Blade Runner?
I actually don't like the original Blade Runner.
Okay.
Which is like, I don't know if that's gonna... I have never had a movie, more so than Blade Runner, that seems like it should be the perfect movie for me, that I don't enjoy. I've watched it 3 times.
Okay.
Each time assuming this time I'll get it.
Right.
It doesn't do anything for me.
I've watched it once and had a similar experience, so
Okay.
I was just curious. Well, what about 2049?
Same.
Okay, that one didn't
It's
grab
the
you.
only Denis movie I didn't love.
Okay.
It's not that I didn't like it, like, it was just like, it just fell flat for me. I don't know what about Blade Runner, but it doesn't click with me.
Sure, okay. I got 3 more that we
Okay.
can buzz through pretty quick. Is Dune Part 2 a better movie than The Dark Knight? Because I think this is absolutely The Dark Knight to Christopher Nolan.
Huh.
For me, no, but I'm biased. That's a top 5 all-timer. I overrate that movie, I'll freely admit. But
Yeah, I would be inclined to say no or too hard.
okay.
The only caveat, if the last 15 minutes of The Dark Knight didn't exist, it would be an easy Dark Knight is better. But the Harvey Dent stuff in Dark Knight always bums me out.
Okay.
I find that it does feel like a weird finale.
Right.
If that wasn't there, it'd be easy. I still think Dark Knight probably takes it.
Okay, I agree, but that's interesting. I got 2 more. Is Dune Part 2 better than The Matrix? For me, this is where it bumps into, and I gotta say no. And for me, it's because, I'll let you think, but for me, it's the characters. I think that
The first Matrix.
the first Matrix,
I
forget
have
the
to say
sequels.
no.
Yeah.
Also just like cultural like it changed how movies got made. I think
It remains to be seen if Dune gets that far. I
Yeah.
doubt it. And
Yeah.
also, obviously, this is already so much better of a sequel than exists in The Matrix. But I think the characters in The Matrix, the first one, just the way the people,
Yeah.
that elevates it.
I agree.
And the last one, certainly going to be a similar answer. I got to throw it out. Is this a better movie than The Empire Strikes Back?
It is not.
It is not.
The Empire Strikes Back might be the best movie ever made. Yeah. So I don't. The Empire Strikes Back is the perfect movie, so it's
Right.
that's not easy.
I think, yeah, and that is going to end up being a pretty direct comparison, especially once this wraps up into a trilogy. It's the second one. It's
Yep.
going to be most likely the most ambitious. There's, I think, when it's all said and done, those two movies are going to be.
I think
the
this
same
is actually an
caliber.
interesting point, though. The Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie, in my opinion,
by a lot.
by a lot. Like, it's not. It's the only Star Wars movie that I think stands up with it, regardless of context.
Yeah.
Maybe Rogue One, but like if you just showed it to someone, they could enjoy it even if they don't know what Star Wars is.
Yeah.
I think Dune Part 2 could end up being not the best of the three.
Interesting. Okay.
I think there's a good chance the third one is the best, and I think there's a chance in rewatching and stewing, I will say I enjoyed the first one more than the second one.
Okay.
Not by a lot, but I could see the second one not being the best of the trilogy, which Empire obviously is. It'd be interesting to reassess that when we're done with the
I
third
agree.
one and be like, what was the best? What was the high point, right?
I will say that if this third one is the best, no one's ever done that.
Yeah,
No one's ever done that.
Yeah.
I mean, the third Dark Knight movie, I think you at least liked,
It's okay.
but it's okay. It's way worse than the first two.
Yeah.
And I mean, the third Star Wars, like the third Matrix, if it's even comparable to the first two,
He did it.
he did it.
I am Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, Duke of Arrakis.
Review time, Avery?
I think it's time for reviews.
Scoring?
Yeah,
I
so-
keep alternating scoring or reviews. It doesn't matter, does it?
It's our Skervieweries.
We're going to score this film. As always, we're going to give our critical review, our objective review, and then our personal review.
Yeah.
Why don't you go, sir, and give us your critical review for Dunes, aka Dune Part 2.
Dunes, for me, is an A. It was spectacular, just an absolute achievement. There are little quibbles I have, but it's mostly about how they adapted the source material, or did they make this all that it could possibly be, and that's why it's not an A+. But I mean, there's nothing in this movie that I can really call a mistake.
I'm an A as well.
Yeah,
it's
it's an
just
A.
an A. It's just an A. It's like
That's what it
it's
is.
the easiest A of all time.
Yeah. And then personally, it's gonna go down to an A-. I just can't quite get it to a proper A. And I mean, we've talked about a lot. Our threshold for the A tier is a rewatch, and I don't know if how much I'm gonna like throw this on and rewatch.
I want to rewatch it in theaters.
Yeah.
For that experience.
I'm actually curious. What format did you see it in?
The Ultra
just this-
AVX
Okay.
theater. So like not the one down from IMAX, but
Okay.
better than normal theaters.
Okay, so I had I made a little goof, and I booked my tickets. I booked what I thought was IMAX, and because it said 70 millimeter, it was 70 millimeter, not IMAX. So this is really weird. It was a smaller than normal screen. It was a digitally shot film that they transcribed onto film. Sorry, it was a digitally shot movie that they transcribed onto film
Yeah.
and then projected it. And this was interesting. I don't think it was better, but it was cool watching it with film grain and like jitter.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of interesting.
it brought up a lot more direct comparisons to Star Wars and kind of
Sure.
older properties, and the scenes of the desert just had this fun old sci-fi kind of energy to it. But
You should go see it in IMAX.
I know, I goofed. I thought it was IMAX,
Yeah.
and we showed up, and I'm like, that's a little screen. Were we in the wrong theater? But
Just this tiny little TV at the end.
yeah, like it was very good, and I don't
Yeah.
think it took that much away. But I kind of do want to go see it in IMAX now.
Yeah.
But anyway, A-.
For my personal, I was thinking about A-, but I think my lack of enthusiasm in the theater that might have justified A- was largely because of people talking around me that was
yeah.
frustrating me the entire time.
Yeah, a dude in front of me had a bag of chips. He kept reaching for all
Really
the quiet
bugged me.
scenes.
I think that if I can rewatch this just calmly and on my own time and not have people talking around me, I trust this will be an A personal, so I'm going to
Okay.
keep it at an A. It's not going to go up to A+ just because it's... Actually, I was thinking about this. You know how with the Lord of the Rings movies, they gave Return of the Jedi. They gave Return of the King the Oscar for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Kind of as an achievement for the whole trilogy. Because I don't think Return of the King is the best. I think Fellowship's the best. But anyways, they gave it as the third one was so good that looking back on it, he got the Oscar.
Yeah.
I think if the third one is as good as it can be, I might go back and give this a retro A+.
Yeah.
Because then I'll have this confidence that it's like this perfect little trilogy. At this point, I'm gonna go A, but I could see it stepping up if the trilogy ends up being as good as it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think a kind of interesting comp would be, what do you give Game of Thrones season 4 and season 3? It's like,
Yeah, I know what happens.
if that's like, if I go back and watch it now, it's like a B.
Yeah, yeah. That's just because we're sad now.
Yeah, it's because we're sad. And if they do fumble the bag on this third one, which I very much don't think they will, if they do, I kind of agree. And if they land it perfectly, and and you can go back and rewatch this and get excited for all the cool things are coming, then yeah, I could definitely see a bump up coming there.
He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it.
That's Dunes.
That's Dunes. We saw the worm sign, and we got up on the rocks and avoided being eaten by worms. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. It helps us out oh so very much. We also do have a Patreon with lots of fun stuff up there with teasers and some free additional episodes if you're curious. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let us know what you thought of Dunes.
We read all your comments still, every single time.
Yeah, we're
and we
desperate.
love them. Yeah, we're very lonely.
So we'll let us know what you thought. We'd love to hear it. And until next time, goodbye.